Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome back. This is session 4 of iTree International Academy. Thanks for joining us on time. We really appreciate it. Thank you for turning in your homework. If you haven't, you do have one more chance to turn in last week's homework as well as this week's homework. And I am the strict person on this organizing team, even though I've got a smile. It's not one that's evil. But I will say that if you missed last week's session or you did not turn in your homework, you have one more chance for both to do so in order for you to receive a certificate. So that said, see me if, and we can work this out if you do have an excused absence, but we are only allowing one missed homework and missed session. So other than that, I want to wish you all a good learning today. It's going to be a bit exciting. It's about eco, and I'm going to turn this over first to Krista.
Hey, thanks, Liza. Yeah, welcome back, everybody. And we are in our fourth session of the Winter Academy. And for those of you who are with us for track two, we're going to move on to the second tool that we're going to take a look at for our intensive look at how to incorporate the iTree tools in your work. So having said that, I want to just go ahead and, as a brief reminder, run through our logistics support guidelines. Go ahead and please, keep yourself muted today. We're frequently able to open up the conversations and, let people fire up cameras. But please, feel free to use the chat if you have any questions, even if you have comments or questions for other participants, even if they're not members of the team. But we will try to get to as many questions as we can during the session, either following presentations or as questions come up. We will try to address them live in today's session. A reminder that all of the information that is being made available for these sessions can be accessed at that web page that we have for this year's Academy. That's going to include the agenda. That's going to include information about, and I'm just trying to get to a copy of that page. It's going to have our schedule, and it's going to offer anything that you need for a class and after a class, including information about the homework and how to submit it. Homework can all be submitted to our email account, info@itreetools.org. And any slides that are presented and the follow-up videos for our sessions will also be concurrently available through the website. So just to make sure everybody knows where to find those resources, feel free to let us know anytime if you can't. And I felt like I jumped ahead a little bit, but these are references as well to our website and the various international resources that you can access, as you explore the different project information that's available on the website for international usage and examples of what other folks have done. So as a reminder, this is our team. This is our website address and the email address. We're here and always psyched to be doing this work with the international programs team at the Forest Service. And we're always really glad that such a wide variety of you are able to join us from your locations and talk to us and talk to each other about how these projects can come together. So as always, you're, free to contact us at any time if you have questions or if you're looking for further information. A reminder that we do have 2 weeks in the schedule of sessions where we're going to be taking a break. So we're going to be off the week of January 29th, as well as February 19th. That's also, those reminders are posted on that webpage schedule in case you need to make sure those are on your calendar. And, we will let you know today as well, or actually as Liza just did, different information about how we're thinking about expectations. And as you know, if you've already submitted your Canopy project work, it's coming to our website. We've heard from quite a number of you, and I do want to talk about the Canopy homework assignment just for a brief second. But before I get off of this page about homework, be aware that this week's assignment or, practice work and refresher work will look a little bit different. We're going to spend a lot of time in today's session talking about iTree Eco, and part of the actual work of utilizing Eco is getting it set up on your computer. So homework won't necessarily be something quite as task-oriented like we saw last week with Canopy, but just so you know, there will be information that we're going to share with you for setting that up, or sorry, we're calling it homework, even though it's not really homework, for the next week, so that you're prepared as we move forward with Eco. So I did quickly want to just check in with everybody on the assignment that we had for iTree Canopy from last week. We received assignments from a large number of you, and as Liza mentioned, you're welcome to submit it at any time. Liza is our checker in terms of, how she's going to mark things that have come in and who they're attached to. So if you haven't talked to Liza to make arrangements, or if you've already submitted your homework, everybody seems to be feeling pretty good about their work with Canopy. And what I mean by that is that we didn't have a whole lot of questions from folks who ran up against strange scenarios or who had trouble. So that's always really nice for us, to know that something, was communicated pretty clearly and that people were eager to play around and explore the tool a little bit further. I was really happy to see that a number of people did choose to highlight a local a location that was meaningful to them. So some of you either had readily available shape files to use for your Canopy project, or you simply went in and drew a community area or a park that you wanted to take a look at. And that's always gratifying from where we stand, just in that, understanding that one of the best places to start is with a place that you are interested about and that you're curious about. So those are always great jumps to make. And I wanted to point out one thing. We did receive from many people the copies, the saved version of the PDF that you created once you finished your survey of 100 points. And we didn't have a whole lot of time to review this when we looked at the Canopy reports last week. So I just wanted to remind folks that when you're setting this up for your, a final PDF or a printout, one of the things that you can see it offers you in the layout when it does that is a copy of this map, so that you can see the distribution and the geography that you're using. And the default actually comes up on this white background. And if it's helpful for you to be able to share a PDF or to look at it on top of the base map and the background map, I'm just reiterating that these options are available as you work with the report. And if you selected a different base map, once you go ahead and set up through your browser's print option to save this as a PDF, you'll see that background included in that PDF if it helps you to see it that way, as opposed to just on that white background. So I just wanted to go ahead and show that to folks so that we don't forget that that's available. I did want to let everybody know, rest assured, we had some folks noticing that as you completed 100 points for the location you selected in Canopy, you weren't quite seeing the standard errors that we had talked about for goals when you're doing a survey across, with the random point sampling. And that's fine. It's an astute observation. 100 points in across a diverse landscape will generally not be enough points to have to help you achieve that lower standard error that's going to increase your accuracy of estimates in terms of these kinds of survey projects. That was the intention for this assignment was just to let you guys practice and to reiterate some of the things that we talked about when we reviewed the tool. And hopefully if you can take it a step further and continue surveying and classifying different points, you'll see those standard errors come down. But some of you noticed that 100 points wasn't quite getting you there. And yes, that's to be expected. So we just wanted everybody to at least get through that number of points to see how the flow of the tool works, and to show you what to expect should you continue to do more. But hopefully also to show you how fast it can be to go ahead and do 100 points, right? So it doesn't feel as intimidating to continue on. All right, so having said that, and clearly if anybody has other questions they want to follow up with on Canopy at any time, always let us know. At this point, I am going to hand this off today to Jason. Jason and Anna are going to open up the world of iTree Eco for us today.
Thanks, Krista. Yeah, we did have a couple questions about Canopy in the chat, but I think you actually touched on them, and Anna answered them too. So I think we're all set to move on from iTree Canopy. So I will go ahead and share my screen if I can remember which one it is. So hopefully you can see my one slide here. All right, so yeah, as Krista mentioned, we're going to sort of transition from, you might remember back in the first couple sessions, we talked about MyTree, which was sort of our very easiest to use tool, really our entry-level tool. We use it with all sorts of groups, so that's a really nice entry point. iTree Canopy too, you all who, the homeworks that we all saw, they looked great, looked like you totally understood what you were doing using that tool, and it can be a really powerful tool to estimate where you are in your community as far as the amount of tree canopy cover. But we're going to shift now from iTree Canopy onto iTree Eco. And iTree Eco is a much more involved tool, and we'll get into it today, but we're actually going to spend the next 4 sessions talking about Eco in one way or another. So you'll see that we'll go through it pretty slow because there's a lot of detail in there, a lot of things to consider when you're creating an iTree Eco project. But I think it really sets you up as you transition from iTree Canopy, starting with MyTree, the simplest tool, onto iTree Canopy, onto iTree Eco. You'll see how these tools differ and probably the different applications that you can have for each of the different tools. So back to iTree Canopy, you may remember back to those early sessions, we talked about top-down tools. So this is where we're more or less above our location, looking down at the trees where we're interested in our community. And what we're really measuring with iTree Canopy is the area of tree canopy cover so that we can get a percent cover and so that we can also estimate ecosystem services. So we're just getting tree canopy cover. We're not getting a lot of detail about maybe things like the species of trees. And what iTree Canopy is really doing is that it's assuming, for the purpose of estimating ecosystem services, that tree canopy is typical of the area that you've selected to estimate benefits for. So if you're estimating tree canopy in a city, maybe you have individual trees in a park, there's not a whole lot of overlap between the tree crowns or anything like that. But you may also include natural areas where you have really a dense canopy and you've got an understory and an overstory. And if you think about those in the ecosystem services they're providing, they're probably different ecosystem services. But what iTree Canopy is assuming is really that you have average canopy cover, and that whatever canopy cover you have, it's kind of doing what's typical of canopy cover in your area. So if you really want, yep.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
When you asked at the beginning if we could see your slide, we can see the iTree website. And I'm sorry it took me so long to recognize that you might need to select the PowerPoint slide. I know you said it was just the one, but this is useful background information.
Yep, it's all right. There's not a lot on it. All right, so maybe you can see the slide now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, I'm sorry for the delay, but we got you.
No worries. Yeah, so iTree canopy, again, we're just estimating that amount of canopy cover. We don't necessarily know what different species are making up that tree canopy cover. We don't know kind of the density of the trees in that area. It's just kind of making some assumptions about what's typical. It is still really useful information, and by doing those projects, and many of you did up to 1,000 points to get those smaller standard errors, you can really get a sense of how quickly you can get some really useful information about how much tree canopy cover you have in your area. So it's a really great starting point. It can be really useful for monitoring. So if you're looking at change over time, as Krista showed at the end of the canopy session last week, you can start to estimate how that tree canopy is changing over time. And it can be really useful for goal setting. So if you want to set for your larger community a goal of where we're going to get to as far as tree canopy cover, iTree Canopy is a great tool. But if you want to start to get into managing individual trees and talking about really strategic management of those trees, iTree Eco is going to be the tool that gets you to that point. So iTree Eco, in contrast, is a bottom-up tool. So typically we need to actually go out and measure the trees. So this isn't something you can just do from your office. You're going to measure at least the tree species and DBH. And you can make much more detailed measurements of individual trees. And we'll talk about some of that as we get to setting up an iTree Eco project in the second half of today's session. In iTree Eco, species really matters. So like in iTree Canopy, you don't measure anything about the species. We're just kind of assuming, again, that that canopy is typical and made up of typical species for your project area. But in iTree Eco, you have to tell us what species that tree is, and that species is going to matter for the ecosystem services that that tree provides. There's a whole lot more detail that goes into an iTree Eco project. There's a whole lot more things to consider when setting up a project. So really today, we're going to spend the whole day just talking about project setup and all those key decisions that you make. But there's really a lot more detail that goes into it, and there's a lot more detail that comes out of it. So there's a lot more detail in the results, about the structure of your forest. So if you want to know things like what percentage of my forest is made up of different species and what are the benefits that each of those species are providing, you can do that with iTree Eco, whereas a more general tool like iTree Canopy, you can't quite get there. But these tools actually work really well together too. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of our session when we talk to Akshat. But iTree Canopy can be a great starting point. So you can get an estimate of that tree canopy cover, and you can start to talk to people in your community about what's important related to those trees. And that can lead to an iTree Eco project where you really dig into the details and start to formulate a plan about how to be strategic about adding new trees to your community. So these things aren't mutually exclusive. You can totally do an iTree Canopy project and then an iTree Eco project. And that is really often what we see, is that doing that iTree Canopy project first really motivates what you do next and moving on to an iTree Eco or a more detailed inventory of all the trees in the area that you're interested in. So with that, I'll stop with this slide here. The homework this week, as Krista mentioned, is going to be pretty general. It's going to be two parts. The first part, and the most important part, is that you get iTree Eco installed on your computer so that you can start using that tool. So I'm going to walk through that process first here of what that download looks like. And I think I may have to share this web page here. So this is the iTree homepage. And if you want to get iTree Eco installed on your computer, you actually have to download it. So all the other tools that we've talked about and all the other core tools in the iTree suite all work in your web browser. So you can use them on any device that has a modern web browser, but iTree Eco actually needs to be downloaded and installed on a Windows computer. So what that process looks like, I'm here at the iTree homepage. So this is www.itreetools.org, and I'm going to click on the download button here. And you'll be taken to this page, and it's got some details about troubleshooting. There's a lot of information on this page. And it does mention just what I just said, that iTree Eco is our flagship tool that needs to be installed on a Windows computer. So iTree Eco actually cannot be installed on a Mac. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second here, about what some options might be if you do have a Mac. But from your Windows computer, if you want to download this file, you're just going to click on this link right here under step 1. And it's going to take you to this basic form. We just need some real basic information, just your email. That's the most important thing. We're going to email you a link to download the iTree Eco installer. We like to know where you are because that helps us sort of target our resources and know who's using the tool and your intended use. Beyond that, you don't necessarily need to provide any of this other information unless you want to. So once you fill out that information and click send me an email, you'll get an email with the link to install iTree Eco. And the email will look something like this. And Krista, you'll have to tell me if this email shows up. I'm not sure if it's sharing my screen or just the web page.
It's still just showing us the web page.
Yeah, okay. We'll share. It says it's sharing my screens, but we'll go ahead here. So this is what the web page, or this is what the email link looks like. If you don't get this link in 5 minutes or so, you should check your spam folder. This link should come pretty quickly. For me, it always comes within a minute. So you shouldn't have to wait real long to get this link. And if you go ahead and click on the link, it's going to download the installer. I'll click on this, and for some reason it crashed out of that, but it'll just want you to, if I do start, oh, it's telling me that this link is expired. So you can only use this link one time, and I already used it once, so I would have to go through that form again. And this is again so that you can't just sort of share that link with everybody, so that we can collect that information about who's downloading and installing. But if you click on this, it's pretty big. I wouldn't recommend doing this while we're in the academy here. It's almost half a gigabyte, so it will take a little while, and it might bog down your internet. So you do want to make sure you're on a good internet connection before you start downloading that. And we'll go ahead and jump back over, and let me see if I can actually share my desktop here in a second. Yeah, I don't know why it's not going to let me try one more time here.
If you, the control button will let you select more than one, Jason.
Yeah, but for some reason it won't let me just pick my desktop.
Oh, I hear you.
Oh, I guess I'll just I'll talk through what it looks like to try and install iTree Eco here. So when you get that file, it's going to be a .exe file, and it'll download it to wherever you tell it to download it to. So let me see if I can just share this folder here. So I downloaded it to my desktop here. So it's this iTree 2025 6.1.52.exe. And to install that, you can just double click on it. You might get a warning. I'm not going to do that because it would really bog down my computer here. But if it doesn't work when you're just trying to do that regular install, you can sometimes get past any issues by choosing to run as an administrator. So if you right click on that file and pick run as an administrator, that should allow you to install the file with a few more permissions that sometimes get past some of the issues that we run into. But typically the install goes pretty smoothly. If you do run into any issues, if we jump back to that web page, and we're back on our downloads page, there's a lot of information here about if you run into any trouble. So if you have any trouble installing iTree Eco, or once you get it installed, you go to open it and you see any error messages, there's a lot of information here about what to do in those cases. I'll just point out a couple really useful things. If you do have a Mac, we have a couple recommendations. It won't install on the Mac, but if you try and use an emulator or Parallels, or you have a dual boot system that does the Mac operating system and the Windows operating system, you can install it on those. We've also had users in the iTree Academy actually recommend cloud desktop, so desktop as a service. So Amazon Web Service actually has a 3-month trial, and you can do this. It'll create a Windows desktop in the cloud, and you can install iTree Eco there. The one thing about installing Eco is you do want to make sure it's on your local machine. So you don't want to install it in like a Google Drive or an environment like that. You want to make sure it's on your local computer, wherever that happens to be. We do have a couple videos too that walk through that process for a Mac, and we also have videos that walk through the process for installing on a Windows PC too. One other thing, if you are on a university network or a corporate network or a government network, those are often really restricted about what they can install. So if you do have trouble installing on one of those types of systems, you might have to talk to your IT folks about that process and make sure that you're able to get it installed. So those are just things to be aware of. For the vast majority of you, it will install without any issues. If you do run into trouble, email us at info@itreetools.org. We recommend that you do this. You try to install as soon as possible, just in case there are any problems. Try and get it downloaded and install. It will typically take less time than it's taken me to talk about it here. You'll get it installed in just 5 minutes or so, and you'll be up and ready to go. But if you do run into any trouble, giving yourself a few days to get past any of those will help so that you can make sure that you can get through the rest of the homework before we get to our next session, where we can actually all be using iTree Eco at the same time, so you can sort of walk through it as we walk through it on the screen. So with that, I think I will stop sharing, and I'll hand it over to Anna to talk a little bit more about how iTree Eco works and some of the key decisions you'll have to make as you go through setting up your first project.
Thanks, Jason. Let me
Sure.
get this shit up. Alrighty. So again, I'm Anna Castillo. I'm part of the support team, and as you see, it's a little more complicated to even get iTree Eco on your desktop than Canopy. And similarly, using iTree Eco has a little bit more of a steeper learning curve. So we're going to kind of walk you through getting started with iTree Eco today. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the model basics. So a lot of the science behind Canopy and MyTree first gets put into iTree Eco. So iTree Eco is a little bit more complex, or is the more complicated model driving the results behind the other tools that we've learned about already. You will also learn about some of the tree variables or measurements that are part of your iTree project, as well as the different options and the idea of a pilot project. And we'll also get kind of an orientation from Jason about how, what it looks like once you actually open the application on your desktop. And we'll hear from Aksha and from Fabiola about their experience setting up a pilot project in their respective locations using iTree Eco. So,
Hey, Anna.
yes.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
You were coming in just a little bit quiet, but
Okay.
whatever you just did, fixed it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. Yeah. So as a reminder, we keep pointing out to you, but there are a lot of iTree Eco specific learning resources. So I know I'm going to be talking about a lot of things, and it can maybe feel a little overwhelming, but just try to listen and absorb and know that there are other tools that you don't have to watch every single move that Jason makes on the desktop, either today or for the next few sessions. We have the video learning library, which has video specific to Eco, but to all of our other tools as well, about how to get your data into Eco, and about measuring plots and stuff like that. So, you always have this in the, available to you all. And we also have manuals that have step-by-step guides about, starting a new project, how to stratify your project and things like that. And as you get your results, we're really, simplifying a lot of complex ideas, but you might find yourself wondering, well, how did they calculate that? Or what does this mean? And we also have a lot of background information that you can get from Understanding iTree, which is a document that we've mentioned that is really a comprehensive overview of the science and methods behind iTree, as well as some of the original research, and that you can refer to if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of how the iTree model works. So again, just as a reminder that this is always here and you don't have to write every single thing that I say down to try to remember how the model works. All right, so before, this is a good point because before you even have Eco on your computer, you want to be thinking about, a lot of different considerations that you may not need to with, for example, Canopy or, for setting up your project. So just thinking about, setting you all up for success for having a good Eco project, we wanted to take the time to go over these considerations to think about with your project and why you would want to learn how to use Eco and use this tool for your goals. So as you'll see, there is a little bit more of a learning curve for Eco compared to some of our other tools, like even Canopy. So we do kind of encourage users to start with a pilot project, which we'll learn a little bit more about what that means and how that plays out as we go through today. But basically, this is a practice project or a trial project. And you might have big ambitions that you want to do your entire city, for example, but you kind of want to start out a little smaller. It could even be your backyard or the block that you live on, so that you can really one, go through the whole process of what it's like to set up a project, but also think about or help you anticipate some of the challenges of doing an Eco project, that what it involves to manage data, to measure the different variables relating to the trees, and how much time this actually takes. So this is a good way to familiarize yourself with Eco, but also help you plan out your project for your bigger goals. So of course, with determining your goals, thinking about what you would want to use these results for. So maybe you're really interested in outreach and you want to make tree tags, or maybe you want this information to support a grant to help plant trees. So, thinking about those things will help you set up your project in a way that will best serve the needs of your goals, as well as kind of help you, could do like a gut check, like, well, is this really, the right tool, or can I get some of these answers, like say using iTree Canopy or even MyTree? And next, what resources you can have or that you can get. So I mentioned time, of course, this is a little bit more of a time investment. And, if you've got a lot of different projects going on, that's something that, how are you going to fit in this project? Or maybe you want results, in a matter of a couple months rather than a year, so those are all considerations, as well as the number of people you expect to be able to work with you. If you're doing this a solo project, it's going to take you quite a bit of time to measure all these trees, whereas thinking about if you can recruit volunteers, which can also take some time in itself as well. And similarly, what are the boundaries of your project? As I mentioned, if you, might eventually want to do your whole city, but, maybe at the beginning you want to focus more on your municipality or even just your neighborhood, just to get started. And similarly, what are other partners that you may be able to collaborate with that can help you access more resources, whether that's, money, or it could be access to people who are also interested in trees and urban canopy, or maybe they have like, are interested in like public health or something, and you can communicate with them about the benefits of trees with public health, and that can actually help increase the impact of your project as well. So again, with Eco and really with all our tools, these are sort of some of the questions that you want to be thinking about to really help make the most impact out of using our tools. And it's really fun to do MyTree and even Canopy and do all those clicks, but how can we take that information to the next level and have the greatest impact? So as a reminder, again, for the iTree framework, specifically for Eco, we have the structure, function, and value. So as Jason mentioned, with Eco, in contrast to Canopy, for example, you will have to go out and measure the trees. So again, at minimum, all you need is the diameter at breast height, or DBH, and you need to be able to identify the species. So that could also, be part of your consideration too about how good you are at tree ID and how good are you at training others to identify trees and things like that. But then iTreeEco will then estimate the function of these trees. So what are they doing on the landscape? And that includes, for example, measuring how many pollutants the trees are taking out of the environment, whether that's through leaf exchange or through just deposition as the pollutants are in the air, and also how trees are interacting with the built environment and how they might affect, for example, the energy usage of heating and cooling a building. And finally, like all the rest of our tools, ECO will put a monetary value on these functions and the benefits that they're providing to society. And again, so to go over how this all plays as you put it into this software. ECO is going to take those field measurements that you decide to include and combine them with the city pollution and weather data that is either already in database or that you're going to work to input into iTreeEco, and combine that with the species specific information, model those functions and estimate these and estimate the value of those functions, both quantitatively, as in like how much carbon it's taking out, as well as the monetary value, such as what is the social cost of carbon for removing carbon out of the atmosphere. And the results that you'll get out of ECO will kind of similarly follow this framework. First would being the structure. So you'll get a summary of the field measurements that you took from the trees. So that includes, for example, your species distribution. It'll tell you, the diversity of your trees. If you have a lot of trees that are maybe in just a couple species, or you have, the diameter distribution of your trees, that maybe you have a lot of small trees and not that many older trees, or vice versa. You have a lot of older mature trees, but in your area, there isn't a lot of effort into planting trees. So you don't have a lot of small trees to kind of replace the older trees when they die out in the future. So this is all useful information for managing your urban forest. And it will also calculate the leaf area of individual trees and collectively. And this is a factor that is especially important for air pollution. So the leaf area drives a lot of those air pollution removal values. And it will also summarize the condition of the trees if you input that information. So this could be important to know, generally what are the condition of your trees. If they're really poor, that could be an impetus to maybe invest in taking care of those trees versus planting new trees. Or if they are in really good shape, you can feel good about focusing your efforts on planting new trees, for example. And next, the function. So we have the 4 core ecosystem services that we talk about with all our iTree tools. So that includes air quality improvement, energy effects, carbon storage and sequestration, and the hydrology effects in terms of avoided runoff. So again, iTreeEco will quantify these both in the total amounts of say, CO2 removed or another air pollutant, as well as apply a monetary value. But with ECO, you also get other functions that you don't get with other tools, such as the shade ultraviolet effects. So that's kind of like a UV index that could be valuable. Like say if you live in a tropical country where the trees really are providing a lot of cover from the harmful rays of the sun. You can also get some information about foodscape characteristics. So which trees are providing fruit or food to your community. There is also a wildlife suitability model focusing on birds. And iTreeEco can also measure or provide results on some of the disservices of trees, such as volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. And these contribute to ozone and smog. So those are, kind of things that you want to consider if that's an issue in your community. And finally, again, you get the value. So that includes the monetary value as well as some equivalent values, and it can also provide a cost benefit analysis about the value that the trees are, like you say, like a return on investment on your trees, if you will. And it can also provide, excuse me, some summaries for management. So I think someone asked about, how can you use this for management? And this is mostly on trees, but it's all like about managing your, the greenery in your community as well. So um, so some of you might be wondering, or maybe we'll get asked, well, how accurate are these models for international locations? As we've learned, these tools, or this model was developed in the United States. And the answer is it kind of varies. So some aspects, such as the tree structure assessments, are applicable everywhere. Getting that information about your species distribution or your the size class structure of your trees is, doesn't matter where it is. That's all still really useful information, and those estimates will be could be, very useful regardless of where you are. For the ecosystem services, specifically for carbon, the iTree Eco model uses species-specific equations. So those are, as long as you correctly identify the trees, those will be as accurate as those models are for anywhere in the world. And we also have tropical equations as well. And combined with the local information about where those trees physically are, you actually get, pretty accurate results. Again, as good as your data as that you input. And similarly with precipitation and pollution, the estimates relating to those, such as the air quality improvement and the avoided runoff effects and stuff, will be as good as as these data is in the model. So we do have all these countries in green that are fully integrated. So we have precipitation and pollution data for these, and many, I think it's over 400, and this map is probably outdated by even now, of precipitation and pollution data submitted. So you are still getting, very localized of results. And the caveat being that if, this data, is missing a lot of, we use hourly pollution data and precipitation data. So if it's missing a lot of hours, or if it's a poor station, then, that's really, could affect the quality or accuracy of those results. But, that all comes down to, yeah, how good your results are depends on how good the data behind it is that is inputted into the model. And finally, for energy, these models are based on US buildings. So the answer will kind of depend on how different your buildings are from in your home country versus the buildings here. But we do have some documentation that you can read and kind of make your assessment if those are, how accurate they are to your situation. And for the monetary values, those can be converted to local currency. So that's really helpful too for communicating the results. And with all that said, I mean, it's still a model, and there's still going to be some different levels of accuracy, but there's nothing quite like iTree available for the rest of the world, especially anything that's free. So I think that's still really powerful that you can confidently present the results from iTree to your community and to your, the stakeholders that you work with. All right, take a breath. So with all those things in mind, now we're going to start thinking about how, some of the key decisions that you're going to have to make as you set up an iTree Eco project. So off the bat, there are some, decisions that as you open your project, as you'll see, that you'll have to decide, and as you set up the configuration, such as whether you'll do a complete inventory or a plot sampling project, which I'll discuss a little bit next, what tree measurements you'll collect from while you're out in the field about the tree and its relation to, like I said, to the built environment. You'll have to decide if you stratify your project. So that basically means you're kind of breaking up the results of your project on things that you're interested in. So that could be, let's say you care about tree distribution in different districts of your city, or maybe you care about public spaces versus private spaces. So that is eventually a decision that you'll have to make in the configuration of iTreeEco. And you also have to decide how you're going to collect your data, where you're doing that either just pencil and paper, or you want to use technology such as the mobile data collector that we provide. And finally, you'll need to determine if you need to use the iTree database if your country or your city isn't already integrated into ECO. All this to say, but the leading or overarching question is to be thinking about how you're going to use your results. So that will guide what decisions you'll make in setting up your project. So the first decision that you have to make right off the bat when you open your project is whether, when you create your project, is whether you want to do a sample or a complete inventory project. So with the sample plot, you will have to randomly assign plots across your study area. And this is typically used when you have a very large study area, such as a city or a whole watershed, for example. And it's basically you're sampling throughout this area to be able to extrapolate the benefits of the trees to that entire area. So you'll set up these plots either through a GIS, or you can use ECO as well, and go to these plots. You'll locate them in your city or wherever you are, and measure all the trees and gather a little bit of information about the plot and input into ECO. So then you'll be able to extrapolate the results for the entire area that you've sampled. So that is the pro of this, but the con is that this can be quite time intensive. So a lot of times we recommend starting with what's type of complete inventory. So that sounds like more work, but the good thing is you actually get to choose your project area. So say you want to start out with your trial or your pilot project. You're like, well, I'm going to focus on my campus. I'm at a university. I'm just going to focus on my campus with some students that I work with. Or even you could start as simple as your neighborhood block, or even your backyard. So as small or as big as you want to start out with. But basically, you're choosing a defined area that you're going to measure all those trees. So you get to choose how many trees you want to measure that you care about. And that's kind of a key word here too, that you care about. So maybe, you really want to focus on some mature heritage trees that are on your campus, that you want to capture the benefits of those. Or maybe there's a pest that's coming to your community and you want to look at how much those threatened tree species are contributing to tree benefits for that area. So this would be the way to do it, through a complete inventory project. And another great thing about this is you can, if you already have a tree inventory, big or small, you can import directly into iTreeEco with a complete inventory project pretty seamlessly, and then you can get results for those. So that's another good way to kind of, if you already have these data available, you can start learning how the eco the process of doing an iTreeEco project. And of course, there's some pros and cons to doing a sample plot versus a complete inventory. So basically, the scale of your project with a sample plot, like I said, you can cover or get results for a much larger area, such as a city, but you will have to complete about 200 or so plots, and that's due to kind of the standard error, as we've talked about with Canopy. That's kind of when we see the standard error start to taper off and decrease, so that you can be sure that you have a pretty accurate result. And we have that you'll have over 500 trees. I think Jason at one point said that it was more closer to about 1,000 trees that will have to get measured for a city using a sample plot measurement. And but there are some things to consider that it can be a little more challenging, both in that just the time and resources required to do this kind of work, but also that, the plots are totally random. So they might end up, in someone's backyard and you're gonna have to ask for permission, or they might end up in, on the far side of town, and, could take you hours to get there, or you just might not be able to get access for a variety of reasons. So that can actually add quite a bit of time to the process. And you can ask others who've done this sort of process, type of project, about what that's like. And but the pro of this is that, again, you'll get to get an estimate for the entire area of interest rather than just those trees that you measured, as you do with the complete inventory, which, in many respects is easier. You get to choose which trees you want to measure and how many of them you want, but you're only going to get results for those trees. So, like I said, decision number one. So the next decision is which tree variables you're going to measure. So as we mentioned, you need to be able to identify the tree and get the diameter at breast height. And we have a whole suite of optional but recommended tree data relating to the height, the condition of the crown, if you care about energy effects, you're going to want to get the direction and distance to the buildings. And this is all to basically make the model better. So if you only include the first two variables, you're only going to, or the model is going to assume that this is a perfect idealized tree. But we know not all trees are like that. So by adding these other conditions, it helps the model provide better, more accurate results. But if you don't include these these variables, the model will use these defaults. So it's still, we are transparent with this. So these might be okay for you. They might be like, yeah, my trees are, generally have a full crown, and they're, generally pretty healthy. So I'm willing to accept these things. But as we know, not all trees are perfect, and they don't, follow this. They don't all are this idealized version of a tree. So if you know that you have a lot of trees in your community that maybe look like this, or aren't in great condition, those are all things to consider when you're deciding what variables you're going to measure for your project. And of course, each variable that you add will likely add some time to your project time, so your project timeline. So it's kind of a trade-off in thinking about those decisions. And again, this is why doing a practice project is really important. That'll allow you to be like, well, okay, it takes me about this long to do a tree. And you can kind of think about like, well, that was a lot of work, and I don't know if I care if that's important for me for me to measure. So we have this table. This is in Understanding iTree, the document that I referenced, that shows the relationship between those tree variables and the ecosystem services. So say, for example, you are really interested in the energy effects or the energy savings you can get from trees. You can read down this column and be like, okay, well, I definitely need to accurately identify my species, which you should anyways, but you might want to also get the height as well as measure the percent crown missing, and you're definitely going to want to measure the distance from the trees to the buildings. So this can kind of help you make those decisions about which trees you want to measure. Which tree variables you want to measure, so that you can basically optimize and best use your time and your resources available to you. Okay, so the next decision you'll have to make as you're going out and collecting data is how you will, collect it. So a lot of people like to stick with paper and pencil and go out and, write down those measurements. This is, pretty straightforward. And, you especially say you're working with a lot of volunteers, and maybe they're not so technology savvy. So you're like, well, this is, probably easier. So that is one path that you can choose, or you might want to use the mobile data collector that we provide. So the mobile data collector is requires is a function of iTree Eco, but you will need to have like a cell phone or an iPad that has a cell phone service or is web enabled, and you can actually assign plots, for example, if you're doing a plot project to the people that you're working with, or if it's just, you know, you and a couple people, whatever, and write down directly that information and submit it to our server. And then when you get home that evening, you can retrieve those results directly into your project. So a lot of people who do run these big projects use the mobile data collector, and it generally works, you know, really well. But it does require some work up front in like training people how to use the mobile data collector and making sure that they submit their data to the server and things like that. So it is, you know, in either way, there's, you know, different challenges in managing data and volunteers. But it is up to your preference. You know, if you really, you know, want to invest the time to learn, excuse me, how to use the tool, or if you want to use your time inputting the data from the paper data sheets at the you know, every weekend or something like that. So just something you'll have to decide. And oh, well, there you go. Those are, again, some pros and cons of doing one method versus the other. And then the next decision is whether you will need to use iTree database. So if your location is already fully integrated in Eco, as I mentioned in the previous map, you're set. You know, you already have your location information as well as some precipitation and pollution data. The year that these are available can vary from location to location. So if you know that you have access to or would like to have new data, you know, the database is still the way to do that. So something to consider. And you know, we have a lot of cities that are already also in the iTree database. But if you find that your location isn't, or the data is just really old, you know, we would encourage you to go check out the database, because adding new location, well, one, gathering this information can be, you know, kind of time intensive depending on where you are and, you know, things like that. And then once it is submitted to iTree database, it can take up to 3 months to integrate it. So, you know, just thinking about your project planning in ahead. And if you know, you definitely want to get your location integrated into Eco, but if there's a similar location or maybe a pollution station that is a little bit further away, but you think is similar enough to where you are, that is also a possibility, and that you could use in your project if that's acceptable to you as well. So there's a lot of workarounds or ways you can approach this, but I would say checking to see if your location is already in Eco would be a great first step. Okay, so I've talked about a lot of these decisions, and as you can see, it's, you know, it can be a lot of work up front and even carrying a whole project through. So once you kind of go through this mental exercise, you can kind of test your decisions with a pilot project. So as I mentioned, a pilot project is a small project that you are going to set up as kind of a test case for the goals and the things that you're trying to capture with your project. And this can help you evaluate some of the potential challenges and limitations of your project as you go along. One of my favorite funny quotes is it's Mike Tyson's, like, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And, you know, we can sit here and think about how we're going to do these things and it's all going to go great. And then you get out there in the field and you're like, well, that didn't quite, like, I couldn't get to this tree, or it was a lot harder to identify trees. Maybe you live somewhere that the trees lose their leaves in the winter and you're like, well, now I really can't tell what this tree is and stuff like that. So it can help you kind of test out those things and help you come up with a plan for how you're going to address them in your project. And this can be a really good way to, again, do a pilot project and then expand it to become part of your ultimate larger scale project. So now I think we might take a break first, but coming up next, Jason is going to open up Eco and show you, you know, kind of highlight some of these key decisions that I mentioned as you navigate the application once you do have it on your machine. But I think we're at about, yeah, it's 11, Jason. So I don't know if you want to take a break, or you want to? Yeah.
No, that was great, Anna. We did have a couple questions in the chat, but I think they're more anticipating stuff we're going to cover coming up in the future. So how to find plots and how to measure tree variables, things like that. So we will cover some of that next week and the week after. But yeah, I think right now we can take a break. So we will come back in 5 minutes. So 5 minutes after the hour or half hour, and we'll actually open Eco and see how far we can get. Start using iTree Eco. So I'm going to go ahead and share iTree Eco on my screen. And hopefully you all can see the software center. And Anna
Yep.
or Krista, you'll just have to yell at me if I jump over to Eco and something doesn't show up here. But
Will do.
so yeah, once you have iTree Eco installed, it'll show up under your start menu. So you can either go to all apps there and scroll down to the iTree app, or you can just type iTree in the search bar in the lower left on your Windows machine, and you'll come up with that iTree application. If you've used it before, but you haven't used it in a little while, the first time you open it up, it might look a little different. So it's going to take you to this software center to start. And this actually provides links. It looks a lot like our homepage to all the different tools. But in this case, we just want to jump into Eco. So we can go ahead and click on iTree Eco here. And I'm going to spend a few minutes just walking through kind of orienting to iTree Eco so you can see what the iTree Eco tool looks like. And then we'll talk a little bit about setting up your first project. So setting up your first project is actually going to be the homework for today after you get iTree Eco installed. So this is what iTree Eco looks like when it opens up. This version we just updated just before the new year. So a few weeks ago, we updated iTree Eco. So anything that we change in these big updates will show up in this What's New panel here. So this is pretty useful to see. At least the first time you launch iTree Eco. One of the big changes we just made is that we updated our default price for the cost of carbon. So that's explained up here. We also added the ability to import plot data. So this is actually a change we've made since the last time we did an International Academy. So those are all still listed here, and it kind of links you to some of the resources behind those decisions. And you can even link back anytime we do these updates. We add all those new locations that users have submitted through iTree database, so you can find that information as well. So that's what's new will pop up every time. So I'll go ahead and hit OK there. In general, when we use iTree Eco, we're going to move through the tabs up top here from left to right. So that's kind of how the general flow goes. And then you'll kind of move through the ribbon here from left to right as well. It always starts you out at the support tab. And there is actually a lot of useful stuff on the support tab here. You can find the change log. So any changes we've made recently in iTree Eco, you can find there. You can provide us with some feedback. If you're looking for the user license, so depending on how you plan on using these results, the license for how you can use iTree and use the results is provided there as well. Occasionally, if you run into trouble with iTree Eco, we might ask you what version you're using, and the version is provided up at the top here, version 6.036, but you can also get to the version information. Oops. iTree didn't like that. I think it doesn't like searching for things on the internet at the moment, but I think that probably has more to do with running the Academy at the same time that we're trying to share my screen here and grab stuff from the internet. So let me just open Eco one more time here. I'll share that for you. All right. So yep, we're just back on the support tab here. The other useful thing here is software updates. So once you've installed Eco that first time, you've gone through that whole download process that I mentioned before, you can update the software from within iTree Eco just by clicking on the software update button. And you can actually get to a whole lot of our resources. So things like the iTree methods that will take you to that Understanding iTree document. We have a whole bunch of user guides here. So these go through all sorts of different things, data limitations. They talk about different types of projects, so stratified projects in different ways, and talks about stratifying. And we have a field manual here. So I know a couple of you already asked about measuring some field variables, like how do I measure the tree crown of a highly pruned tree? That field manual has a lot of information about measuring each one of those variables that Anna mentioned. So it really goes into a whole lot of detail about measuring and collecting that field data. And the user manual here is also the user manual for iTree Eco. So if you need more detail about anything, you can find it there. And one other useful thing before I leave this support tab is we have this help panel here. And this help panel will change as you click on these different things. It'll especially change once we get to project configuration and data. So it's contextual. So it'll tell you help information related to what you're seeing on the main iTree Eco screen. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into project setup. But that help menu can be really useful as we go through. And just real quick here, the only other tab we have available right now is the View tab. This mostly is just for changing the view of what you can see in iTree Eco. But the one thing that is really useful is that you can get the whole current species list for iTree Eco by clicking on the species list button. And it's going to grab the entire current species list. This is the most up-to-date species list. This is what the tool is actually using right now. So if you need to know if a certain species that you're interested in is in iTree Eco, this is where you would find it. If it's not in here, then you can go ahead to iTree database and have that species added, and it'll show up in here the next time we do an update. And you can export this to a spreadsheet, to a CSV file, if you want to have it offline as well. So just know that that's anytime anyone asks me where's the iTree species list, this is the place I point them to. This is the most up-to-date list you'll get. So from there, let's go ahead and go, and we'll start like we're going to set up a project, and we'll go to the file menu. One thing under this file menu that's really useful, especially if you've never used iTree Eco before, is that we have a bunch of example projects. So these are all projects that are built into iTree Eco. So if I click on Open Example Project, you can see all the examples we have. So we have a few different types of projects. We have some stratified plot inventories. We have some complete inventories. Down the bottom here, we have a few international projects. So we've got one from Mexico that we can go ahead and open. And what you'll see with these projects is that once we open them, now all these tabs are available because those projects are complete and they've been run. So if you've never seen an iTree Eco project and you want to see what it looks like and all the information that's in there, go ahead and look at one of those example projects, and you can start to explore what maybe reports look like. Because if you set up your own project, you won't be able to get to reports until you collect data, run that data through the model. So it might take you a little while, but you can always see the types of reports and the information that's available by checking out one of those example projects. So those can be really useful and a nice place to start if you're a little bit confused about what's going on in Eco, or you want to know maybe how other people have used it. These are all real projects that have been done by real iTree users. But for our case, we're going to go ahead and set up our first project. So we're going to talk a lot about pilot projects. So this is starting out with a small project where you're going to test some of those key decisions that Anna mentioned. But we'll go ahead and set up our very first project here. So when you do this, you will go to the File menu and you'll click on New Project. And now we're up to that very first decision point. So this is a really important decision. Are we going to do a complete inventory? And again, that's described here using much of the same information that Anna shared before. Or are you going to do a plot sample? Since this is our very first project, plot samples tend to be a little more challenging to carry out. You have to find those random locations all throughout your area of interest. We'll go ahead and stick with a complete inventory to keep our very first project as relatively simple. This is a really key decision point because this is one decision that you can't change after the fact. So you really have to decide, am I doing a complete inventory or am I doing a plot-based project? And we'll talk a little bit more about those as we go through the next few sessions. But in our case, we're going to stick with a complete inventory. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here. And it wants me to save this project somewhere. So I'm just going to save it on my desktop here. And this is going to be my International Academy example. And when you save these projects, it's going to save them with this .ieco extension. So if you're ever looking for a project, that's where you're going to search for on your computer. You do want to make sure you know where you're saving it, whether you're saving it to your desktop or some other file location. Every once in a while, we'll get someone ask where their project is, and we don't know. It's not saved to the cloud or anything. It's saved to your local machine. And that's another important point. Don't try and save these in some sort of remote drive. So if you have a Google Drive or a Windows Drive, anything like that, don't save it there. It needs to be in the same location where you installed iTree. So if you installed iTree on your local computer, you need to save your files there as well. Otherwise, you'll end up with some errors that are really hard to diagnose when you go to open those projects. So now our project's been saved, and iTree will actually automatically save. So anytime we make changes here, it's automatically saving that. So we don't really need to worry about that anymore, that file saving. It is important when you do these projects to know that typically you just want to have one project manager who's responsible for your project file. You can have lots of people doing data collection. You can have lots of people who you're sharing the results with. But as far as managing the project, you just want one person who's in charge of this file. You can always make copies of it. So under that file menu, we can always save copies of that iTree Eco project and make backups. But you never want to have multiple people working on copies at the same time, because there's no way, if one person makes changes and another person makes changes on two separate copies, there's no way to merge them back together. So you want to be really careful about who's managing your project overall. So again, since we did that file and we saved it, it automatically moved it over to our project configuration tab. So we're just going to move through this ribbon here, and we'll move through these tabs here, again, left to right. First, it wants a project name. So for this example, I'm actually going to use we'll use Liberia. I saw we had one of our Academy attendees from Liberia. I don't remember having any folks from Liberia in previous sessions, so we'll go ahead and do a small project around the Capitol grounds in Monrovia, which is the capital city of Liberia. So we'll go ahead and type our project name there. This project name will show up on the top of your report, so you do kind of want to make sure that you have what you're interested in there. Series name, this is a placeholder if we're going to put in multiple projects within the same thing. I don't think that's really super useful now, so I'm just going to leave the series name as 1, and we're doing this project in 2025, so I'll leave that. So then I'll jump over here to location. And we've talked about this before. iTree always needs to know where you are, because there's a lot of information in the background about local weather, local climate, local tree species, and what they're doing on the landscape. So we can go ahead and we can try and select Liberia here, because that's where our project location is. And you'll see it doesn't open up any sort of subdivisions of the country here. And it asks that I can check adjacent countries because Liberia isn't yet in the iTree Eco database, so we don't have anything to select from. And that's one of the reasons I selected this, because in some cases, you're not going to have a location that you can pick. So in those cases, at least for the Academy, we're going to select similar locations where we do have data already in iTree Eco. You can then later on go through the process of adding your location to iTree database, and then it would show up here, and you could edit your project to get localized results. But we'll go ahead, and I sort of poked around just a little bit to see if there was anywhere we already had in iTree that was comparable. And it actually seems like Colombia is relatively comparable in some climate situations. It's at a similar latitude. So we'll go ahead and we'll just use Bogota as sort of an analogous location for now for Monrovia. So I'm just going to select Colombia and Bogota. And we know that Colombia has been fully built out already by Maria, so it's fully integrated. So it has all that background data already in iTree Eco. And it's going to take a minute here because it's grabbing a whole bunch of data from our database specific to that location. So I'll just let this spin for a second. But we can actually change some of this information. So again, it's actually localized more to Monrovia than it is to Bogota. So this is an urban area, and we can change our population. So this is the population of Bogota entered by default, but we can go ahead and change it to the population of Monrovia, which I scribbled down in my notes here, is about 1.76 million. And we can enter a population density. Again, this is something you can look up or calculate. And I think we're around 9,065 people per square kilometer. And again, we're just going to keep moving through these tabs left to right. So now we need to select our weather and pollution information. And for our weather and pollution year, I know that in Bogota, we definitely have useful weather and pollution from 2019. So I'm going to just switch my year to 2019. And then we go ahead and we select our station from a map. So I'll click on this select on a map. And this is all the weather station that's going to go in the background. And you'll see it's going to take a minute to load. Again, it's pulling. We've got over 1,000 weather stations all throughout the globe. So it's going to take a minute to load these up. And I know if I go too fast here, iTree will get mad and crash on me. So we'll just take a minute here. But we can actually spin this map so we can take a look and see if there is any weather station near Monrovia that might be relevant. So we don't necessarily have to pick that station that's right in the middle of Bogota. So I'm just going to zoom out and we'll zoom over here to Liberia. And there are a few weather stations nearby. And anytime you pick a weather station, it's useful to click on it here and see what it lists as far as total rainfall and see if this rainfall is typical for your area. So in this case, from what I've seen, and folks from Liberia can correct me, you actually get quite a bit more rainfall than that, around 1 total meter of rainfall. So you might want to click around and see if there are other weather stations. You can see some of them have lower rainfall. That just isn't going to be relevant. This one doesn't have any rainfall, so you don't want to select any that don't have any rainfall. But in our case, this station seems about as good as we can do, so we'll go ahead and select that one for now. If we uploaded our own rainfall data, it would show up here as user supplied data, and we could actually use that in our project going forward. But for now, we can just select that station and hit OK, and you can see it fills in there. And it's going to select the precipitation station as well. Then we have to select our pollution stations. Most of the time, it's easiest just to let it auto assign. So it's just going to pick the nearest stations if I pick this auto assign. And it selects stations around Bogota because that was where our project setup was. But we can also look at them on a map as well. So we could add stations from a map. And again, it's going to take a minute to load, but you can see the stations near Bogota and it automatically selected whichever was closest. If we wanted to use different stations, we could zoom out again and see if there are any closer to our project location. In this case, there aren't actually any closer because that pollution needed to be supplied by users and there's just no one in the region who supplied that data yet. So if you wanted to use localized data, you could provide it through iTree database. So in this case, I think we're good enough for now. We've selected some pollution data. We've got our weather station. And now we're moving on to that next decision point that Anna mentioned, and that was our data collection option. So what tree information are we going to collect? And this is just a dashboard here. So we're just going to toggle on the things that we want to collect and leave the ones that we don't want to collect toggled off. And you can see here, there's about 15 or 20 different variables that we can select from. And just to kind of go through these in order, very first one here, whether you're collecting your data in English or metric, is a very important decision. This is, again, it mentions it right here. It's got it nice and bold. You can't change this once you start your project. So if you're going to be measuring dBH in centimeters, if you're going to be measuring crown heights and crown widths in meters, you definitely want to change this to metric before you start collecting any data. You won't be able to change this. As soon as I hit this OK button, we wouldn't be able to change this. So if you accidentally left it as English units, so that's feet and inches, you wouldn't be able to change that. You'd have to start over in this project setup phase. Species and dBH, we actually can't change these. So I'm just going to leave those checked. Those are the defaults. You always have to collect at least species and dBH. But everything else is up to you. The fields that are here in blue, those are the ones that affect the ecosystem service estimates. So where Anna talked about, you can measure these things if you want more accurate, more precise estimates. You would want to turn on all of these if that was important to you to have those most precise estimates. It's important to note that measuring all these things does take time. So everything you turn on here is something you're going to have to collect for every single tree, and it's going to take you more time in the field. So there's a trade-off between that precision of the results you're going to get and how much time you spend measuring these things in the field. For this example, we've got our species and dBH. I'm going to turn on land use. We had a few questions about GPS, and we'll actually use this project next session. We'll talk about doing data entry. So we'll use this project, and it can be useful to collect those coordinates. So we would be collecting the coordinates, the latitude and longitude of every tree. So I'll turn on that map GPS. Anna talked about strata as a key decision point too. This project here, where we're just going to measure trees kind of near the Capitol grounds, near the Capitol building in Monrovia there, we don't necessarily need to stratify, but we might want to enter the area that we're measuring, because that can be really important for doing things like tree density. How many trees do I have per hectare? What are their benefits per unit area? So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on because it allows us to either stratify and enter the area, or we can just enter the area we're interested in. Maybe we have a nice laser hypsometer we can use to measure tree heights, so we can get tree heights really fast. So we're comfortable with that. But we know that crown size is just going to take too long, because you have to measure, if you choose to measure crown size, you have to measure all 4 of these different variables. So how tall is the tree, how wide is the crown in 2 different directions, and what we call percent crown missing. All that takes time, so we'll just leave that off. Same with crown health. Again, you can customize these as much as you want. You can pick the ones you want. And then there's all these optional fields. So the ones that are not in blue, they don't affect the ecosystem services, but if you measure those, you will get summary reports that can be really useful. So maybe we'll want to do maintenance tasks. Maybe we want to recommend maintenance on each one of these trees near the Capitol grounds, so we can turn that on. There's also some custom fields down here that you can enter if you're interested in any of those. But yeah, there's a lot of different fields here. If you're unsure what any of these are, if we keep scrolling down here, each one of those fields is defined below the table here. So if you are interested in, hey, what's this status field? Well, that status field is just recording whether a tree is planted or whether it's naturally regenerated. So is it just grown from seed on the site there? The seeds fall off the tree and the tree is regenerated from those, as opposed to being planted. So if that was useful for you to record, you could go back up here and turn on the status. There's also more information. Again, I mentioned this help panel. So this changes since we're now doing this project definition, and it's going to have information about each one of our variables. And it also tells you what ecosystem services it impacts. So you can make some decisions about, oh, well, I'm not really interested in energy. Well, then you don't have to measure anything related to energy, like distance and direction to buildings. So all that information, again, is in the help panel. It even links to some of the resources on the website. So you can get to a lot more detail that will help inform your decisions that you're making in these data collection options. So we've gotten now through most of our key decision points. We've set up a project, and we can go ahead and hit OK here. And there's just a few more things in project setup, and then we're going to pause. We'll actually get to data entry next week, and then we'll talk about results the week after that. But when you hit OK here, it gives you a few warnings. So it tells me, hey, you're not choosing to measure crown health. So we're going to use this default value of 13% dieback for all your trees. So again, this is just more information to inform you about the decisions you've made and how they impact your results. So I'll go ahead and hit OK here. And we even get one more set of information here that's telling us exactly which reports will be available. So the ones in red are not available. So it's not going to tell us street trees, because we didn't turn on that street tree, non-street tree option. So if you really wanted to measure or wanted to know a summary report of what percentage of your trees are street trees versus not street trees, you would hit cancel here, and you could go back and change that. Most things in that table where you're toggling those things on and off, you can change at any time, but you do want to be careful. Like if you haven't measured tree heights on any of your trees and then you decide to turn it on, well, then you're going to have to go back to all the trees you already entered and measure all their heights, because you have to measure every one of those variables on every one of your trees. So I'll go ahead and hit OK here. And now we can go ahead and we can keep moving through these left to right. You'll see, since I turned on land use, all my land uses that I'll be able to select from are available here. If you wanted to add another land use, or maybe some of these weren't of interest to you, or you're using field data collectors and you don't want them to have to worry about, you have no golf courses in the area you're measuring, so you can delete that field. So you can customize all of these things as you go through. That maintenance field was one we added, so that was maintenance task. So you can see what those are. So there's tree pruning and crown clearing, and maybe that tree needs to be removed, but we could add another category here. Maybe we want to say, there's some stuff going on with this tree, but we're not going to do anything with it this year. So maybe we'll add another category that we want to say is revisit this tree next year. So you can customize these. A lot of these fields are really customizable as much as you want to put in there, especially those optional fields. You can really make them most relevant to your project. So once that's in there, anytime anybody's entering data, this option will show up under that maintenance task field. So again, we'll just keep moving through left to right here with the strata area. Since we just have one strata, we're just measuring those capital grounds. I'm going to change this to represent that. So this will be the strata we're measuring. And an abbreviation, sometimes if we do a whole bunch of strata, they show up in a table and those abbreviations are used instead of the whole stratum name. And then it wants to know our area. And again, that's how it can get to those density measures. So I did just some rough measurements, and I think the area around the capital there where we might be measuring trees is around 35 hectares. So that's all you would have to enter. Maybe if we were doing more areas, maybe we were doing more parks or we were doing university campuses, we could add those as additional strata. We'd get all our results summarized by whatever we enter in this table. And with that, we're pretty much through the project configuration table. We can export this information if we wanted to reuse it another time. Again, these are just adding and deleting fields, this information over here. So with that, we've pretty much worked to set up our project. I'm going to go ahead and OK on this table. And there's just one last thing I want to show on the data page here before I hand it over to Krista. We'll talk a lot more about this next time, and I'll get into a little more detail. But one of the really important things as far as project setup is this benefit prices button here. So this is where you can actually use your local values. So if you have local information about the carbon price in your country, and it's much different from the carbon price that we're using, that's where you would enter this information here. And you can see this is by default, it's using the monetary values for Colombia. So if you wanted to customize these to your location, you could definitely do that. You can put in an exchange rate, and you can put in, again, any of those monetary values that would be more relevant to your local area. And again, we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go forward. But that's everything for project setup. So this is what you'll do for the homework. You'll set up a project for your location, and you will send us what we call a packed project. So to make a packed project, we just go back to this file menu and we click on packed project here. And it's just going to save it. Instead of that .ieco file, it will save it as a zip file. So I'll just do, put in a name for that zip file. And it's just going to save it again to my desktop here so I know where it is. And that's the zip file that I would then send to that info@itreetools.org, and I would be done the homework. So do give that a try in the homework. And if you have any questions about project setup, always email us at info@itreetools.org. And with that, Krista, I think I'll stop sharing and we can talk a little bit to Akshat and Fabiola about how they've used pilot projects and their first projects to really set the stage for the larger things they've done in their locations.
Sure thing. No, that was great, Jason. And we had the opportunity to address, again, some good questions that came in about submitting location information. If you find that your information isn't there, why it's not a pragmatic choice to use real-time data. And the fact that ECO is considering a year's worth of data in order to provide the estimates. So it's not uncommon to see that the entirety of the information that's being used isn't necessarily, it's not going to be today's date. One of the questions that we had to also was about why can we choose more than one pollution station in the configuration? So if you want to talk about that for a minute.
Sure. Yeah, you can definitely choose multiple pollution stations. It'll actually average them. So it'll run the whole model on the stations individually and it'll average the results. So you can totally pick as many stations as you want. It can sometimes give you more accurate information. The trick is making sure that some of those stations are less good than others, and we're trying to get information around that. But you can always see the exact data that you selected. It'll show up in the results there. And we'll talk about that more going forward. But yeah, that's a really good point, is that you can select a whole bunch of stations if you're interested in having more than one station. And also, when you start to do this in international locations, especially ones that have been added through iTree database, typically people have only added 1 year of data. So you might need to switch what year you're looking at so that you can find local weather and local pollution data. Mostly those are going to be years from sort of 2018 on to 2022. So you can just sort of select those different years if you're not finding really local information to see if maybe another year has local weather and local pollution data.
Great, thank you. And in addition, we had some folks looking ahead for demonstrations. Actually, we were talking about configuring custom fields, but as a reminder, Jason is going to walk us through demonstrations of how to enter your data next week. We're working through an eco project in a couple of different stages. So you guys are thinking about the right things, and we're going to get you there. But configuration is not a small part of that. So as Liza reminded us at the end during the break, it's really helpful for you to be thinking about just getting as far as the download and familiarizing yourself with the software and how to navigate things. So that's why we're focusing on that for today, and are actually encouraging you to go so far as to download the homework. Don't wait. And then you want to make sure that each of these features is working as expected, and we can always answer questions if you find that it's not. So now that we've talked about the configuration, what I want to do is just take a few minutes to bring this back to and relating it to our ideas about pilot projects and why it's important to think about these things and considerations for configuration, as and why setting up a pilot project is a constructive and helpful way to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and demonstrate with a couple of slides how we have our two partner experts with us today that are going to talk about their particular pilot projects and how that was constructive in helping them move forward. So we're going to talk to Fabiola and Akshat briefly in this last handful of minutes about the things that they started to think about in order to get started with ECO. And even if you're brand spanking new to ECO, or if you've done smaller projects in the past, it's always important to give yourself some time to get to know your way around the tool and to understand what the tool is going to ask you to do. So the reason we spend this time encouraging the things that you might think about for this pilot project, they're really a way for you to clarify your goals, to understand what the tool is going to ask of you, is the questions you guys have had already. So is your location ready for analysis? Do you want to be submitting some additional information respective to you locally for weather and pollution? Or is it, at least to get started, you can select an analogous location that will work just as well for you. But all of those things are pieces of discovery that your pilot project are going to help you with. And it goes beyond just understanding the structure of the software, but it's also thinking a little bit about what kind of data you want to collect and how you're going to do that. Those things are going to mean you want to know a little bit more about your resources. How much time is this going to take you? How many team members might that mean will facilitate this for you? And again, what are some of the questions that you're looking to understand? So it's not just about sort of, can I utilize this tool where I am, but what are you asking it? What are you trying to look for it to do? And these ideas about what are you looking for from the results of such a project, and who are you trying to share share it with? What are you hoping it's going to tell you? And so walking through a pilot project like this is going to help you understand, again, what ECO can and cannot do, but it's also going to help you understand why customization can be really helpful. You don't have to feel limited to just the basics. And the more information you can provide to the tool and the more data you can collect on either your trees or your plots, the more robust your end results are going to be. So part of this is just about finding out what the tool is going to give you on the other side and what that means you want to be putting into it as you get started. So I want to talk for just a minute about the pilot projects that our partners set up, just to tell you a little bit about, give you some reference about where those are and what the considerations were. So for Akshat in particular, one of the first questions they were thinking about in Delhi was with respect to air pollution. And it was a situation where for this particular, for Delhi, Akshat had already done some work to understand what their canopy looked like, and that was great. So he wanted to know a lot more about what the species implications might be, and how do you address these questions about how do you get into the specifics about pollution mitigation with respect to the trees that you have. So which trees are, actually providing the benefits that we're most interested in. And we meaning, you for where you are, but with Deer Park in Delhi, Akshat was specifically trying to understand a little bit better how a species distribution understanding was going to help him move forward with planning and how were they going to get the most out of understanding the composition of their species. So that looked like a very simple operation. He set up an inventory for a small park in Delhi that was going to look at a small number of trees, but looking at the benefits in return was going to then offer Akshat a way to break down by species how some of this information by species was getting him closer to where he wanted to be in terms of these implications for air pollution and mitigation. And I just want to go ahead quickly before we talk to our partners. Fabiola's questions were a little bit different. So when she was considering setting up a pilot project in Mexico City, she was thinking about some management questions within a local park setting. And Chapultepec Park in Mexico City is a large public park that she was hoping to learn more about. Like I said, it was about managing this public space with respect to the canopy that it contains. And this allowed this project to grow into a much broader inventory where they were able to make discoveries across different zones of the park. But it really then became a nice community asset project. And what I like to show off too is not just the report that Fabiola's team was able to provide with this inventory for the park, but the local municipality partnered with several community organizations to put together a really great map of this this park inventory that was completed. And it brought a lot of the information that they had gathered to life. So it was really fun for at least, like I said, I always like exploring in the map, and this was a really nice example of the way that this data could be translated. But as you can imagine, not just getting through your eco inventory and producing a report, but then turning that information around into something that you can distribute across a community like this takes time. It takes resources. So where do you even get started? If you have big dreams and you have big plans, how do you get there? So I want to actually start the question I'm going to pose to Fabiola, and then we'll talk to Akshat about the same. But tell us why you started with this particular park, what your management thoughts were at the time, and how the considerations that you made setting up this pilot project informed how you proceeded.
Hi everyone. Well, in my case, we start with this project because this is a huge park in Mexico City, so it was very important to have a, a data about what is the value of trees in that park. Particularly in this area, we have huge trees that we saw that huge trees provide a lot of environmental services, and that's why we also have some resources to work in this park, so that was perfect for us to begin with this very important park in Mexico City and show the value of trees. In our case, the idea to make or to have to implement iTree in this park was to calculate environmental services, but also make management decisions about trees. So we measure a lot of variables uh, to try to have accuracy in the estimation of benefits, and also we get some information about if the trees need to be removed or they need to be pruned. And with all this information, we elaborate some like a management plan or master plan, and, and to take decisions in what to do in every tree or in every area, if we need to plant more trees or we need to remove trees, and all these decisions we make to improve the structure of the of the forest. And that was very, for me, was a very important experience to understand what it will give you and all you can do with this information. And also, we try to put this in the map to facilitate to people the interaction with this information, so people can explore the map and see the trees that are in the park and see the benefits. So that was the idea to work with Chapultepec.
That's great. And tell us how long it took you to complete what you considered your pilot project. I know you had some folks who could help out, right? So you were able to, I know Fabiola did a lot of work on the front end to understand what ECO was going to need from them, but then had some people who could help her do it. And how long did that take?
Okay, well, we begin with some small areas like you mentioned, but after we make it more extensively, we in that project we work with 5 crews, and I think it takes like 6 months or a bit more to make this huge inventory. Like we measure like around 20,000 trees, I think. But yeah, it takes a lot of time and a lot of people working on that.
Yeah. No, but it did take time. It was an effort that required some focus and some mobilization. And again, you want to be thinking about what sorts of resources do you have, what don't you have? And actually, Akshat will be able to tell us a little bit about thinking of it from the other side. But I'm going to pose the same question to Akshat. What made starting with Deer Park a good idea, and what did you learn?
For me, I chose Deer Park because I wanted to just try out how to measure the different variables that we collect in iTree. I had no idea. I had less idea of how to collect them. So for me, the intent was not to do a full park assessment of trees. It was to see different types of trees because Deer Park specifically has, I think it has, I think probably more than 100 different species of trees, if not more. So the idea was to see how do you, different trees will have different ways of assessing because you can't apply the same rule everywhere. So that was the idea, to get a diversity of different species and what's the right way to measure them and to practice what I've learned from the field manual onto the trees.
Nice. And how long did it take?
I just measured like 10, 15 trees. The idea again was not to do a full assessment, but I think at that time, doing one tree took me 30 minutes because I was trying to understand how do you do the crown canopy missing and dieback and all those things. I was not very clear with them. So
Right.
just one tree took me 30 minutes initially, but then it just takes now 5 minutes.
Talk to us also about some of the things that you were able to do after completing the pilot project. How did that propel you forward, both with what you knew you had to do to use ECO and what you were starting to learn about your species with in guiding your pollution goals?
Yeah, so
Or
uh,
that question, your questions about that.
yeah, so the ultimately the whole intent of doing iTree or using iTree in Delhi was to understand how beneficial are the different tree species in combating air pollution, because Delhi has a 24% green cover and still it's a very polluted city. So I wanted to understand which species are the most impactful in absorbing air pollution. So uh, people tree is one of them. People is the scientific name is Ficus religiosa. So that helped me understand through iTree that even numbers prove what the traditional wisdom says, that ficus species in in India specifically, have a huge leaf area and a huge air pollution absorption. So once you put numbers and science into it, then it becomes undebatable. Otherwise, it's just one person's word against the other. So that just really made everything very clear. When you have numbers and data for that, nobody can argue.
Excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about your approach when you discovered whether or not ECO was ready to do your location? What sort of information did you need to collect for
Yeah.
Delhi, even just to get started?
So I think at the minimum, you need to add your location into uh, into iTree. So you need to have things like the latitude and longitude of the city and the population and things like that. So that may take about an hour or so. That's an easy exercise to do. You just have to Google a couple of things. So that's the first step that I did. The other two steps were a bit difficult. So the second step was pollution data. So fortunately, I could find the data online, but it was not very precise. So I had to dig deep. So pollution data, the data that I got was uh, 1 hour each entry and for one full year. So 24 hours, 24 data points in one day and then 365 days. So I got that data online. So that was slightly difficult, but the more difficult part was the rainfall data, because Delhi doesn't have any online platform where you can. I think it does now. At that time, there wasn't any online platform that was available. So I had to go to the local government's office and ask them, I need to buy this data from them. So I had to actually buy that data from them. I think it's easier now. So I took those three steps: location, pollution, and rainfall.
Nice. So, and yes, that's not something that every location has readily available via Google search, right? Sometimes you have to go after that data. And I want to give Fabiola the opportunity to answer the same question. Again, differently resourced, and I know Fabiola did a lot of the work herself to get Mexico City as a location ready, not to mention eventual integration of Mexico as a country. But just to speak to your evolution with ECO and how Mexico City was set up initially.
Yeah, well, fortunately in Mexico City, we have a lot of information about pollution data, so it was not a problem, but we need to complete some gaps in the information. That was maybe the difficult part. And fortunately for Mexico City, we don't have we don't have problems to get the information. But in other cities of Mexico, it's difficult to get this because you don't, well, maybe the information has a lot of gaps, or you don't have information of all the pollutants, or sometimes it's a bit difficult. Also, with weather information, sometimes you don't have enough or good quality data. So that's a difficult part, but you can explore getting this information maybe from stations located in airports or in that huge databases that are available in the internet. So I think you need to look for this information first if you don't have this data added to I3. That's important.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be useful to maybe speak to other colleagues, or in order to find out what's available if you don't already know, or if you don't know where to find it. There, different locations can obviously be differently resourced, but there might be, as Fabiola is mentioning, different places to look for that data. And in some places, it's going to be more robust than others. So just, don't let that be a deterrent necessarily, to understand that you're not necessarily going to find it right away. And it's important to understand too, what Fabiola is saying can result as gaps in your data. So even if you have a solid, base of data that can get you started, there might be things that you need to do to clean that up a little bit. Just, understand that that's all part of the process. I wanted to maybe at this point ask Liza if we wanted to give anybody an opportunity as we're about to wrap up to ask additional questions, or if you've gotten anything that would be particularly helpful for us to have Akshat and Fabiola talk about, with respect to where do you get started?
Yeah, I think with that, we only have a couple of minutes left. Krista, why don't we let people download, play around with it, noodle on it, and then send us,
Great.
offline some questions. And
Yeah, I think that's
when you
fine.
guys do download, if you've completed it, let us know so we can check that off for you on our spreadsheet. Okay.
And actually, as Jason referenced, once you've done your download, we're asking folks to put together that initial project package for us. So you can submit all of those, just like you did for Canopy, to info@itreetools.org. And so, yeah, with that, we are basically at 2 minutes before the top of the hour, or the half, depending upon where you are. So if we've gotten through most of our questions, I can see that some of the questions that have already come through about setting up eco and setting up updates, Jason and Anna have been answering those as we go. If there's anything remaining, Jason, let me know. But I want to thank again Akshat and Fabiola for being the people who have actually done this where they are, who willing to speak to us about it, because it's very it's easy for us to we've answered all the questions. We've heard people ask so many different questions, so it can be hard to actually focus, or to remember each time how to help people feel at ease about the things that you want to think about setting up these projects, and that there might be some things that you need to adjust for along the way, and that's okay. Part of setting up a pilot project is understanding how that's going to look. And in the next 2 weeks, what we're going to do is walk through then how do you input your information, how do you look at your trees and input your data, and then what to do with the results. So those questions that you guys are asking about demonstrating data entry, we're absolutely going to get to those. I'm going to give Jason the last minute, but thanks for being here. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Kristen. No, I think we're in really good shape. And yeah, as always, appreciate Akshat and Fabiola and their perspective. And Yeah, we've got lots of good questions. It's great to see the enthusiasm. It's great to see that you all want to push forward and start running iTree Eco projects, and we will get there. We're just doing baby steps because there's a lot to cover. So it'll take us a little while to get to the results, but we will definitely address all the questions you've answered, and we're looking forward to seeing the projects and ideas that you all come up with. So thanks again, and we will see you all next week for more iTree Eco and a little bit more iTree database as well. Thanks, everyone.